If you're new here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more humanity, yes stories, and tell me in the comments. If you could tame any predator in the galaxy, which one would you choose? Now let's dive in. The chamber of the Galactic Council was vast enough to contain a warship, yet silence ruled it like an executioner's blade. Holographic projections flickered across the amphitheater. Soldiers running, armored columns burning, screams muffled by static. Entire regiments had been swallowed in darkness, their formations ripped apart as though a black wind had torn through them. Counselors, creatures of varied skin and carapace, spoke in clipped voices heavy with fear. They had no word precise enough for what they witnessed, so they called it only the Predator. It was no myth. Its trail was not folklore. It left cities gutted, outposts erased, and commanders gibbering like children. Every attempt to destroy it had ended with bodies strewn like discarded armor plating. One report whispered that it walked through 1,000 soldiers as a wolf might through a flock of stunned prey. The recordings should have been clear, yet they shook and glitched as if even machines trembled at what they captured. A blur of muscle and shadow moved too fast for eyes, claws slashing through steel, alien blood spraying across scorched earth. Then always the aftermath, silence and corpses. And yet, in one fragment, a figure appeared. Not the Predator but a man. The aliens paused the recording, voices colliding in disbelief. A human scout, alone, visible amid the devastation. Lean, dirt-streaked, his gear patched by his own hand, he walked with the gait of a survivor. The Predator had slaughtered everyone else on that battlefield, but it had not touched him. Captain Elias Kale was his name, though the Council did not know it. Once part of a recon unit, now presumed dead, he had been left behind after his dropship was shredded in orbit. Weeks turned to months and the galaxy assumed him gone. But there he was, moving with deliberate purpose, rifle slung across his back, eyes narrowed as though searching for something no one else could see. The Council argued. Some demanded extermination of Earth before humanity unleashed more creatures like him. Others insisted it was coincidence, that no beast would spare prey merely for being human. Yet beneath their posturing, unease spread like infection. Elias, unaware of their debates, moved through the war-torn planet with quiet calculation. He rationed his food, filtered water from shattered streams, and used the land as though it belonged to him. The ruins of alien strongholds became his shelter. What killed armies he did not yet know, but he felt its presence like a shadow over his shoulder. At night he heard it. Not in growls but in silence. The absence of insect buzz, the sudden stillness of wind, the way his skin prickled before an unseen gaze. He had hunted predators on Earth, wolves, mountain cats, once even a bear when survival demanded it. This was no different, only larger, sharper, stranger. A predator still bled, still left tracks, still chose when to kill. Elias began to follow those signs. Broken branches too thick for ordinary creatures, claw marks raked through armored hulls, footprints sunk deep into ash. He did not chase it recklessly. He mapped its patterns, studied where it struck, and waited. If it was flesh and blood, then it could be understood. And if it could be understood, perhaps it could be survived. On the third week of pursuit, he came across what remained of a battalion. Their armor was shredded as though knives had peeled it away, weapons twisted like wire. Blood pooled in dark rivers. Yet amid the carnage there was order. Every commander killed first, every comms array smashed. It was not rage. It was strategy. That chilled Elias more than the corpses. The Council too saw this footage, intercepted from drones circling overhead. The Predator stalked the battlefield even as they watched, moving with terrible grace, striking soldiers before they could scream. But then there he was again, the human. Walking alone through the carnage, calm where all else was panic. He does not flee, one counselor rasped, mandibles twitching. He seeks it, another whispered. Or worse, croaked a third, it seeks him. In the recording's final seconds, the Predator stepped into view, towering, fur black as vacuum, eyes burning like embers. Its claws gleamed with fresh blood. Soldiers fired wildly, but it was already among them, tearing, vanishing, reappearing like a nightmare made flesh. And behind it, distant but visible, Elias moved forward instead of back. His rifle remained unslung. His face, smeared with ash, betrayed no fear. The footage ended there, static drowning the last screams. In the Council chamber, silence returned heavier than before. None dared voice the question clawing at every mind. Why did the Predator slaughter thousands yet not the man? Why, in the presence of that human, did it glance but not strike? On the ground, Elias crouched in the ruins of a shattered outpost, pressing a hand against a fresh track larger than his torso. Warm, heavy, alive. He looked into the scorched horizon where smoke curled from dead armies. He whispered to himself, voice steady despite the weight of exhaustion. Whatever you are, you're watching me. Aren't you? The wind carried no answer. Only the faintest echo of something massive moving beyond sight. Elias adjusted his rifle strap and began walking toward it. The night bled into the ruins like ink spilled across stone. Ash floated in the wind, carrying the smell of scorched flesh and broken metal. Captain Elias Kale crouched low in the wreckage of a collapsed wall, his breathing steady, his eyes narrowed to slits. He had tracked the creature for days, but tonight the hunt was no longer one-sided. Something vast moved beyond the haze. He felt it before he saw it, weight pressing against the air, the sensation of being measured by something older, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Soldiers might miss such signs, but Elias had grown up learning how to notice the quiet pause before a wolf strikes, the way the forest stilled when predators circled unseen. That silence now wrapped around him like a shroud. A sudden scream shattered the stillness. Not human. An alien soldier stumbled into view, armor fractured, weapon sparking. Behind him the darkness shifted, coalescing into a shape too large to belong to anything natural. The predator emerged and Elias finally saw it clearly. It moved with terrifying calm, a shadow given muscle and bone. Its fur gleamed as if night itself had sunk claws into its hide, and its eyes glowed with the muted fire of a forge. The creature's shoulders rippled with coiled strength, and each step cracked the earth beneath its weight. The soldier fired blindly, plasma burst searing through smoke, but the beast simply wasn't there when the bolt struck. A blur of motion, a glint of fangs, and the soldier's body fell in two halves at Elias's feet. Elias's hand tightened on his rifle, though he did not raise it. Every instinct screamed at him to stay still. The predator's head turned, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. For an instant, its molten gaze swept over him. A living avalanche of death paused within striking distance, and Elias knew he would be a corpse before he pulled the trigger if it so chose. But it did not strike. The eyes lingered, then slid past him as if dismissing him entirely. It turned its attention back toward the scattering aliens beyond the ruins. That indifference unsettled him more than any attack. The slaughter began again. Soldiers scrambled in organized lines, shouting commands, their formations bristling with weapons. It made no difference. The predator stalked them with the grace of a panther and the precision of a surgeon. It leapt from shadow to shadow, claws slicing through armor, jaws snapping down on throats before voices could call for aid. Entire fire teams collapsed in silence, their bodies folding as though a hand had plucked their strings. Elias watched, breath measured, mind racing. It wasn't simply killing, it was selecting targets. Commanders vanished first, heavy gunners next, then communications officers. Each decision gutted the structure of the force, leaving the survivors panicked and leaderless. This was not mindless fury. It was strategy carved in blood. High above, drones captured the massacre, their feeds relayed to the Galactic Council. Counselors whispered in disbelief as they saw the beast dismantle an army. Their words carried fear disguised as analysis, questions sharp enough to cut. Why did it never kill the human? Why did it hunt their kind with merciless precision yet ignore him as though he were not prey? On the ground, Elias moved carefully, shadowing the predator without announcing his presence. He knew the risks. One wrong step, one clumsy noise, and he would join the corpses strewn across the battlefield. Yet curiosity warred with survival. The beast could have killed him already easily, yet it had not. And that question gnawed at him like hunger. The battle ended swiftly. Silence fell again, broken only by the hiss of burning wreckage and the faint drip of blood from broken armor. The predator stood alone amidst the carnage, chest heaving, claws wet. Its head turned slowly as though savoring the stillness it had created. Then, without hesitation, it vanished back into smoke and shadow, as though the night itself had reclaimed it. Elias exhaled. His pulse thundered in his ears, though his hands remained steady. He rose from cover, boots crunching softly against ash, and studied the destruction with a soldier's eye. There were no survivors. Not one. He could leave now, slip back into hiding, pretend he had seen nothing. But he didn't. He crouched near a claw mark carved through a steel girder, pressing his palm against the groove. The cut was clean, purposeful, not random. This isn't just a beast, he murmured, voice low, more to himself than to the dead. This is war-made flesh. He looked toward the direction it had gone, into the night where even fire refused to glow. Then, shouldering his rifle, he followed. Above, in the council chamber, arguments broke like waves against rock. Some shouted for the annihilation of Earth, others demanded immediate withdrawal from any planet where the predator was sighted. Yet one truth hung heavy in the room. No matter how vast their armies, no matter how advanced their weapons, they could not contain what they had just witnessed. And though they would not admit it aloud, each of them felt the same unease, that the only creature the predator had chosen to spare was a man. Elias kept moving step by step into darkness, where the tracks grew fresher, where the silence deepened, where he knew it was waiting. He was no longer just surviving. He was seeking. And in some deep, unspoken part of him, he already knew the predator was waiting for him to arrive. The planet's nights were long, stretched by twin moons that bled silver light over the ruins. Elias Kale moved through the shattered landscape with the patience of a man who had learned that rushing meant death. 4 days he tracked the predator's trail, each sign etched in ruin. Broken metal where claws had gouged armor, soil blackened with blood not his own, and footprints pressed so deep they seemed carved into the earth. Then one evening he found silence more complete than any before. No carrion birds circled overhead, no insects clicked in the dust. Only the faint hiss of cooling plasma marked that a battle had ended here. Elias approached slowly, rifle slung, every nerve sharp. Bodies lay scattered in arcs that spoke of frenzy, but he noticed something different this time. Among the corpses sprawled a shape too massive to mistake. The predator lay half-crouched, its flank torn open by energy fire. Even wounded, it radiated danger, muscles coiled, fangs bared in a low growl that rolled like thunder through Elias's chest. He should have turned away. He should have left it to die. Yet he stepped closer. His boots crunched on glass stone. The beast's eyes snapped open, molten and furious. Its growl deepened, body tensing to lunge. Elias froze, hands raised in open peace, though his pulse hammered. He spoke not because words mattered but because tone did. "Easy. I'm not here to finish you." The predator's chest rose and fell, each breath a tremor. Blood soaked its fur, dripping thick and hot onto the soil. Its claws flexed once, then stilled. It did not strike. Elias exhaled slowly and moved with deliberate care. He unfastened his pack, drew out his last bandages and a half-empty vial of coagulant foam. Every ration, every scrap of supply mattered, yet something in him refused to walk away. He had seen it kill, yes, but he had also seen restraint. He remembered the moment those burning eyes had passed over him and chosen not to end him. He knelt within arm's reach of death itself. The predator rumbled low, watching each motion, but it did not rise. Elias cleaned the wound, biting back a wince at its sheer scale. The torn flesh revealed muscle layered like steel cables, twitching beneath his touch. When he pressed the foam into the gash, the predator snarled, jaws snapping shut inches from his face. Elias didn't flinch. He held its gaze. "I know it hurts. Stay still. Let me finish." Something shifted. The fury in its eyes did not vanish, but it settled into something older, quieter, like fire banked under ash. The beast's breathing slowed. Let him work. Minutes stretched into eternity. When the last bandage was tied and Elias stepped back, his hands shook from the nearness of death. The predator did not move. Slowly, it lowered its massive head until it rested against the ground. For the first time, it showed him its throat, not in submission but in acknowledgement. From the cliffs above, hidden drones captured every second. In the council chambers across the galaxy, leaders leaned forward in disbelief as the impossible unfolded. The predator, the scourge of their armies, allowed a human to touch it. Allowed him to mend its wounds. To them, it was as if fire had chosen to warm instead of burn. Panic rippled through the assembly. If one human could tame such a force, what would happen if others followed? Elias remained unaware of their fear. He sat against a broken pillar, exhaustion heavy on his bones. The predator's breathing rumbled beside him, deep and steady, the sound of a storm sleeping. He stared into the dark horizon and thought of Earth, of wolves that had once been wild until they learned to walk beside men, of horses that had carried warriors into legend, of the unspoken bond between hunter and beast that had shaped his species since before history was written. "Guess you're not so different," he murmured. The predator's ear twitched. Its eyes half opened, glowing faintly in the moonlight. It did not rise. Instead, it shifted, massive head inching closer, until it pressed lightly against his leg. Elias froze. He had seen lions nuzzle handlers, wolves brush against those they trusted. But to feel the weight of this creature lean into him, to realize it chose to rest, struck him harder than any battlefield. He lifted one hand and set it against its coarse fur. Heat radiated from its body, wild and unyielding yet steady. The beast gave a sound that was not quite a growl, not quite a sigh, and closed its eyes again. That was when the assassin struck. Shadows moved between wreckage, too disciplined for scavengers, too deliberate for chance. Alien killers, dispatched by commanders desperate to sever whatever bond was forming. They crept closer, weapons raised, eyes fixed not on the predator but on the man beside it. Elias felt the shift before he saw them. The predator's head lifted, ears pricked, body tensing in silence. Elias reached for his rifle, but the assassins were already charging. Bolts of energy split the air, slamming into stone inches from his head. The predator moved like unleashed fury. It surged up, claws flashing, jaws tearing through the first attacker before the alien could cry out. Another fell with a spine crushed in its grip. Elias rolled into cover, firing short bursts to cut down those who flanked. In seconds the skirmish was over. Blood steamed in the dust. The predator stood above the bodies, chest heaving, claws dripping red. Then it turned back to Elias. For an instant he thought it might return to what it was, a nightmare of slaughter. But instead it lowered itself again. Slowly, deliberately, it eased down beside him, until the weight of its head settled into his lap. Elias sat motionless, rifle still warm in his hands, as the universe's deadliest predator closed its eyes and breathed as though content. He stared down at it, disbelief giving way to something he could not name. In the heavens above, the council erupted into chaos, voices shrill with terror. They had seen their armies torn apart, their assassins shredded. And now they saw the truth more dreadful than any defeat. The predator had chosen not to stand against humanity but with it. Elias did not know the scale of their fear, only the warmth of a creature once thought untouchable. He rested his hand gently on its fur, and in that fragile moment, he realized something the galaxy had yet to learn. This was not the end of the hunt. It was only the beginning. The first assault came at dawn, when the air still clung to mist and silence lingered over the battlefield. Elias Kale rose from his place among the ruins, the predator looming at his side like a mountain cast in living shadow. He had expected the aliens to regroup, but not with such fury. Dozens of dropships cut through the clouds, disgorging battalions onto scorched ground. Armor thundered. Engines roared. It was not a skirmish. It was an invasion, designed not to win territory but to erase the impossible partnership that had begun between man and beast. Elias tightened the strap of his rifle and scanned the horizon with a soldier's calm. He felt the predator beside him quiver, not in fear but in anticipation. Its amber eyes glowed against the dim light, its claws flexing as though eager for the slaughter. Together they faced an army. The aliens advanced in disciplined lines, weapons raised, their commanders barking orders that echoed against ruined stone. They had learned from their defeats. This time they attacked in force, supported by armored walkers and air support. The ground shook beneath their combined power. To the council, watching through streams of trembling drones, this was a demonstration of control, a final attempt to prove that their dominion still meant something. The predator leapt first. It did not wait for tactics or signals. With a roar that made steel ring, it hurled itself into the nearest formation. Soldiers broke instantly, their cohesion shattered by the sudden appearance of living death in their ranks. Claws tore through plating, jaws crushed helmets. It vanished into smoke and reappeared behind gunners, ripping through their cannons before they could track. Elias moved at the same time, not reckless but deliberate. While the predator sowed terror, he provided precision. He targeted officers, communications units, and heavy weapons teams. Each shot cracked like punctuation against the beast's roaring chaos. Man and predator wove a pattern of destruction, one overwhelming, the other exact. Together they dismantled an army built to dominate worlds. Still, the aliens did not break easily. Their fear sharpened their determination. Walkers opened fire, plasma cannons tearing trenches into the earth. Fighters screamed overhead, unleashing bombardments. Elias dove into cover, dust choking him, ears ringing. He shouted over the chaos, not knowing if the predator could even hear. Left flank. Break them before they circle. To his shock, the beast moved as though it understood. It surged toward the vulnerable edge of the formation, rending armor apart, forcing the enemy line to collapse inward. Elias pushed forward, covering gaps, his rifle barking steady fire. The council's chamber filled with outrage and disbelief. Leaders shouted at one another, their composure unraveling as footage displayed the impossible harmony of human and monster. Some demanded withdrawal, others screamed for orbital strikes, but none could deny what they saw. The predator was not a wild storm. It was a weapon wielded, and the hand guiding it was human. Hours stretched as battle piled upon battle. Reinforcements arrived, each wave greater than the last. Yet every time the same nightmare unfolded. The Predator tore through their ranks with the ferocity of a legend, while Elias directed the flow with instinct and strategy, ensuring their strength struck where it mattered most. Armies that once held star systems crumbled under the weight of one partnership. By dusk, the field lay littered with wreckage and corpses. Smoke drifted skyward in columns, staining the heavens. The Predator stood among the ruin, its fur slick with alien blood, its chest heaving with the rhythm of relentless violence. Elias leaned against a broken wall, sweat streaking his dirt-caked face, his rifle barrel glowing faintly from use. His body screamed for rest, but his mind burned with a realization he could not ignore. They could not be stopped. Not here, not now. Together, they had broken the strongest military forces the Council could assemble. But victory carried its own weight. He saw it in the Council's desperate escalation, in the assassins they sent, in the armies they fed into the fire. They would not relent until either he or the Predator lay dead. And though he had survived the impossible, he knew what came next would dwarf everything before. As night settled, the Predator prowled back to him, its movements slower now but its gaze unchanged. It lowered its head beside him as if awaiting a command, as if acknowledging that this strange human was no longer merely tolerated but chosen. Elias placed a hand against its neck, feeling the raw heat of muscle and life beneath fur. "Looks like they're not done," he said quietly, eyes scanning the horizon. "And neither are we." The beast gave a sound that rumbled like distant thunder, not threat but agreement. Above them in orbit, fleets stirred. The Council had unleashed armies and lost them all. Now they whispered of burning the world itself, of glassing the surface to kill what they could not control. And yet, for all their power, none of them could shake the image spreading across their networks. A human and the Predator standing side by side, undefeated, unbroken, and waiting for the next storm. Elias wiped blood from his hands and steadied his breathing. The day had ended in their favor, but the war was far from finished. The Council would throw everything into the furnace now, desperate to erase the symbol that was forming. And he knew the universe was watching. Entire species, once cowed by alien might, whispered of rebellion, inspired not by fleets or strategies but by one man and the nightmare at his side. The Predator settled into the rubble, its golden eyes fixed on the sky as if it too sensed what loomed above. Elias followed its gaze, lips tightening. He had been a soldier long enough to recognize the rhythm of escalation. The next strike would not be another army. It would be annihilation. And yet he did not waver. He rested his hand on the creature's shoulder and whispered words that were half promise, half defiance. "They'll throw the universe at us. Let them." The Predator's answering growl rolled across the battlefield, a sound that shook the bones of the dead. The night deepened and silence returned for a time. But it was the silence before a greater storm, and both man and beast stood ready to meet it. The first tremor came from the sky. Elias Kale felt it through the soles of his boots before he heard the thunder. The heavens tore open as fleets descended, blotting out the stars. Hundreds of ships, each bristling with weapons powerful enough to level continents, took position above the scarred world. The Council had abandoned subtlety, abandoned pride. They would not risk another defeat. They had come to end both man and beast. Elias stood among the ruins, the Predator beside him, both framed in the firelight of a broken horizon. The battlefield of the day before was still smoking, corpses unburied, wreckage scattered like bones. His body ached, exhaustion clung to him, but his eyes were steady. He knew what was coming and he knew what it meant. The Predator lifted its head, golden eyes glowing as it stared upward at the armada. Its chest rumbled, low and deep, a growl that spoke less of fear and more of defiance. Elias placed a hand against its fur, steadying both himself and the creature. "They'll burn the world if they have to," he said, voice quiet but certain. "They'll sacrifice it all just to make sure no one remembers us." The beast leaned into him slightly, the weight of its presence grounding him. For all its savagery, it waited for his command. And that, more than anything, terrified the Council. The first bombardments began. Fire streaked across the sky, pounding the surface in explosions that rattled mountains. Entire sectors of the ruined city collapsed under the fury. Yet in the heart of destruction, Elias and the Predator moved with relentless purpose. He guided it through collapsing streets, weaving between firestorms, striking when enemy forces deployed to the ground. Each drop squad that landed was torn apart, shredded by claws or silenced by Elias's rifle before they could regroup. The Council's feeds broadcast every moment, not out of choice but because their drones could not look away. The galaxy saw it all. They saw a single man, broken and battered, stand at the center of annihilation. They saw the Predator, once whispered as an unstoppable nightmare, fight not as a wild storm but as a blade in human hands. Together they tore through armies and evaded the wrath of fleets. But numbers could not be denied forever. For every battalion crushed, another descended. For every strike repelled, two more followed. Elias felt it in his bones. Their war was not winnable in any conventional sense. He and the Predator could kill, yes, but they could not outlast the galaxy's will to destroy them. That truth settled on him like ash, yet it did not weaken him. Instead, it sharpened him. He had seen what their bond meant to those watching. The feeds carried more than violence, they carried a symbol. And symbols could not be erased by fire. The Predator seemed to sense his thoughts. After hours of relentless slaughter, it slowed. Its breaths came heavy, its body streaked with wounds old and new. Yet it did not falter. Instead, it circled back to Elias, pushing against him, urging him to sit. At first he resisted. He had never been one to yield while the fight still burned. But then the skies split again and he saw not victory, not survival, but inevitability. The Council would scorch the earth itself if they had to. No amount of claw or steel could stop that. But there was something else he could give them. Something greater than another battle. He lowered himself onto a slab of broken stone, the Predator following with deliberate weight. It circled once, then collapsed beside him, immense body pressing against his legs. Blood dripped from its side, steam rising into the night air. Yet when it rested its massive head in his lap, its eyes softened. Elias's hand shook as he laid it against its fur. Not from fear, fear had left him long ago, but from the enormity of what the moment meant. The galaxy was watching. Billions of eyes fixed on the man and the beast, expecting defiance, carnage, terror. What they saw instead was trust. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Some screamed to cut the feeds, others demanded orbital annihilation at once. But none could erase what had already been seen. The Predator, nightmare of empires, scourge of armies, had chosen a human not as prey, not as adversary but as companion. Elias spoke then, not to the Predator but to the sky, to the drone still recording, to the galaxy itself. His voice was low, rough with exhaustion, yet it carried with clarity. You feared this creature because it couldn't be controlled. You feared it because it slaughtered your armies and refused to kneel. But you never asked why it spared me. You never understood. Humanity has always lived with predators. We don't just kill them. We walk beside them. We earn their trust. And when they choose us, we don't need chains. His fingers brushed over the Predator's ear, gentle, steady. The beast exhaled, a sound more sigh than growl, and closed its eyes. This is what you're afraid of, Elias continued. Not the Predator itself but the truth that humans can tame what terrifies you. That we can turn death into an ally. You can burn this planet, you can kill me, but you'll never erase what you saw tonight. The galaxy will remember. The silence that followed was heavier than any bombardment. The Predator lay still, breathing deep, its head heavy against him, trusting him with the vulnerability no alien had ever witnessed. Elias sat motionless, his gaze unwavering, his hands steady. The Council's fleets hovered, weapons primed, yet no order came. For all their power, for all their rage, they hesitated. Because to strike now would not be a victory. It would be proof of their fear. Across the stars, whispers began. Species long cowed by Council dominance watched the feeds in awe. Soldiers, rebels, civilians, all saw the same truth. A man and a monster seated in peace amid ruin, stronger together than any fleet. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the beast's breath against his leg, the steady rhythm of its heart. He knew the fight was not over. He knew the Council would not simply relent. But he also knew something greater had been born here, something no bombardment could extinguish. The Predator shifted slightly, nuzzling deeper into his lap like a creature finally at rest. Elias stroked its fur once more and allowed himself the faintest smile. They'll come again, he whispered. But now they know we're ready. The night stretched quiet around them, broken only by the sound of a beast sleeping in the arms of the one it had chosen. And so the galaxy bore witness. The Predator had stalked through armies, but in the end, it had found its place not in dominion or destruction, but in the lap of a human. The image seared itself into history, a truth no power could bury. Humanity had not only survived the universe's deadliest predator, they had earned its trust.